What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Tom Waits's catalog. Today, I'm going to review, discuss, not play music from, rank among the other 16 that I've already done, his 2002 release, number 14 official studio album, Alice. Got a couple sort of wide, general, overarching things I want to say about this album before we delve into the actual songs, discuss the trees that comprise this forest. And the first thing I want to say along those lines is this is an album that I think the forest is greater than the individual trees. This is one of those albums that when it first came out and I was first listening to it and first getting into it, I liked it, but it didn't have the same effect on me as it does today, 20 years later, 23 years later. It is one of those that my friends and I don't know how many other people use this term in their love of music, but it was very much a creeper album. One of those that you don't not like it when you first hear it, right? But the more you listen to it, it just gets better and better and better over time, and you start to appreciate the subtleties and appreciate the nuances, and you kind of understand the overall vibe maybe more than you did the first time you listened to it. This is one of those Tom Waits albums where I think a lot of his albums are perfectly constructed. If you look at particularly Swordfish Trombones, Rain Dogs, Small Change, Closing Time even, maybe Blue Valentine to some degree. A lot of his albums are just structured perfectly. The opening song feels like an opening song. Feels like, hey man, come in, we got you, we're going on this journey. And then the rest of the songs feel like this adventure through some kind of Tom Waits musical labyrinth. And then at the end, you're kind of ushered out with some kind of song that feels like, oh, that journey's over. And I went through something, right? This doesn't feel like that. Even though I've listened to this a whole bunch of times and I like the flow, I like the sequencing, I like the way the album is sequenced, I don't think it's necessary. I really do feel these songs could be sort of rearranged and put together in different ways. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the part of this album that didn't floor me from the beginning was musically, I don't want to use the word safe because it still sounds like a Tom Waits album. It sounds like an 80s onward Tom Waits album. We have that sort of Swordfish Trombones, Rain Dogs, Frank's Wild Years, percussion-driven junkyard blues, jazz, these funky instruments no other artist used, these jazz-adjacent, blues-adjacent, lounge singer, drunken, woozy, wino man type thing going on with Tom Waits. That's still there. So if you're not familiar with Tom Waits and you listen to this and you know nothing about him, you may be like, oh, nobody else sounds like this. But if you've been on the journey with Tom Waits, especially since the 80s with Swordfish Trombones, this is oh, we're still here, but we're chiller, a little more laid back, maybe not quite as adventurous. The sort of hitting a lead pipe with a wrench to make a clanging noise, 16 shells from a 30-06 type over the top, going out west type vibe. We don't have any of those really over the top, aggressive, abrasive, just classic. I don't know if rocker is the word, but we don't have any of those really high energy, just intense songs on here. This is a pretty calm album, a pretty low key album. And at first, when I listened to it, because it's the music that I gravitate towards first, it was okay, this is cool. I liked it, didn't love it, didn't think it was bad, but it wasn't one of those that was But then the more I listened to it, and the more I really started to pay attention to the lyrics and appreciate the lyrics and take the lyrics and apply them to the concept of the album, the more everything about this just became perfect and disturbing and haunting and unsettling, and exactly what needed to happen. So the concept of Alice, it is music for a play that was written, a 1992 opera. I'm sorry, I do not have I'll put in the description the man who wrote the opera that Tom Waits had written the music for. This came out. He wrote the music back in like '92. He had a recording of it that got stolen, I think, out of his car. I think is the story. It was finally found. The music was released in 2002. There's something about that with why it was not released for like a decade after it was originally recorded. But the play is about Lewis Carroll's obsession with Alice Liddell, I don't know how to pronounce her name. A play, an opera about a grown adult who is obsessed, in I'm going to argue unhealthy ways, with someone who is not a grown adult, who is a member of the opposite sex, who inspired books that are fantastic. I have read Alice in Wonderland, other than these sort of hundreds and hundreds of children's books that I read every year to my kindergarten class. Alice in Wonderland is one of those books that as an adult I have revisited a number of times just because the wordplay is fantastic. It is so well written. There's just layers to like why this part was written and what it means. But it all comes from this man's obsession with a real girl named Alice. And as you pay attention to the lyrics, and you know that that's what this is about, there are moments in this where you're just like, yeah, that's kind of disturbing. This is a love song to a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old or not a woman. These are love songs too. And so that's really starts to seep in, and it kind of fits the music. There's a melancholy sadness to all this. I've not seen the play. I'm not familiar with the opera, but there is this sense of like, if it is the Lewis Carroll character singing these songs and writing these lyrics, there is this sense of like helplessness, hopelessness, like recognizing that his feelings are inappropriate in society and they're not something that he could follow up on, but he still has them and he's going to express them in this opera. And so there's a lot to this lyrically that like I think has layers. Also, I've read Alice in Wonderland a bunch of times, as I've said. The wordplay on this is at times that sort of fantastical surrealism, but in not like an over-the-top way, but a nice, subtle way that I think works. So it is just one of those albums that the more I listen to it, the more the overall vibe, which is pretty from track to track, we're pretty like here. A couple times we kind of get a little weird and, we get a little more whimsical as Alice in Wonderland is apt to do. But then that whimsy is undercut by this darkness that just lurks underneath, if you're familiar with the Lewis Carroll story. So I like it. I think it's a great listen. But it's an album experience. This is one of those album experiences. I think like something like Rain Dogs or Swordfish Trombones are one of those albums that you need to listen to from start to finish because the sequencing is perfect. Each song builds on each other. The contrast and relief, like anytime on those albums, Tom Waits sort of dips into his sort of 70s piano balladry type stuff. It comes after 3 or 4 songs that sound like nothing you've ever heard. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's like an oasis in the middle of this like musical desert you've never been to. That's not what this is. I don't think you necessarily have to go from start to finish. I think you could put this album on shuffle, and because we're here for most of the time, you're still going to get the same effect. But I do think that effect accumulates over the course of the album as we get more insight into this Lewis Carroll character, and we get more like in depth about his relationship with Alice and stuff like that. So it's an album experience that I don't think is necessitated because of the sequencing, but just because all of the songs fit so well together and do feel like they belong to the same overarching piece. The songs. Opens up with a song called Alice, which is immediately, first thing we hear, Tom Waits is singing from the get-go. Music is there. First line is, "It's dreamy weather we're in," which as an opening line does set up the rest of the album really well, as there is a dreamy quality to this. Not necessarily a positive dream if we know what it's about, but there is this sort of like otherworldly, not quite awake type Alice in Wonderland vibe to most of the music. So the opening line, "It's dreamy weather we're in," is fantastic. And this is just slow, jazzy, chill, Tom Waits as a singer, singing jazz type vibe, some nice mysterious strings. There is a woozy, dreamy quality to this, but there's also a slightly like disturbing quality to this because we know what it's about. Great opening track. So everything I said about you can listen to this on shuffle and it still works, I support that, but it's also a really good opening track. Everything You Can Think is next. It starts off with the sound of a train whistle, and then I think the train moves on, and then at the end of the song, the train comes back, or at least arrives at its destination, which also gives me a very Alice in Wonderland type feel, like we're the beginning, we're falling into the rabbit hole, and then maybe at the end we land in the room at the table. So there is a sense of we're going on some sort of journey after that opening track. Like we get on the train, we're off. The instrumentation is, again, it's slow, it's kind of woozy, it's that kind of, jazzy type thing. Vocally, it's a much more of a gruff performance, much more of a character from a play type performance. Slightly darker side to the lyrics on this part. But yeah, Everything You Can Think. The title clues you in on kind of what it's about the imagery and the surrealistic and the wordplay and the stuff like that. So we're getting in more to the whimsical side of what Alice in Wonderland would be. Flower's Grave. We are going to Dreamland in this, a slower, chiller vibe, imagery about who puts flowers on a flower's grave, which I think is a cool line. Very ballady. There's a nice violin in here that, there is this instrument, I don't know if it's on here, called the Stroh violin that gets used on like 3 or 4 different songs on here, which is a violin that has a horn on it, and just the sense of, I don't even know what it's evoking, but it has a powerful tone to it. That might be what's used on here, but very melancholy vibes. The melancholy of a man who is madly in love with somebody he can't be madly in love with. No One Knows I'm Gone, even calmer than the stuff that preceded this. Very calm in a Tom Waits sense. It's about someone who's buried 6 feet underground, or maybe thinks they're buried under 6 feet underground, or feels like they're buried 6 feet underground because no one knows that I'm gone. Or it's sad. It's not a happy thing. And I've not read the history of Lewis Carroll that much, so I don't know his thoughts behind why it's a rabbit hole and why they go down under there. I'm familiar with the source, the original book, but this does paint the whole falling underground under the rabbit hole thing like I might as well be dead and buried in underground to Alice for all that I mean to her while she's my world. I don't know. I'm reading a lot into this. It's a compelling listen. We get this really over-the-top, mad, twisted, circusy song with some nonsensical German, I believe, called Komiensuspat. Komiensuspat. Some weird random, I believe it's not actual German. The only English in this entire weird, crazy, upbeat madness song is And We Can't Be Late, which a reference to the White Rabbit right there. There's some really dirty low saxophone that's kind of playing in here. Probably the most sort of over-the-top, out-of-control marching band type music for a play type song on here. One of the more jarring things on here, especially with it being in this really harsh German, but it works. Poor Edward. We then get 2 songs about actual circus performers or urban legend type circus performers from the 1800s. Something called Poor Edward, who was an urban legend of a man who had 2 faces. He had a face on the back of his head and it could do different things. It's a tale of woe musically because there's this yearning, aching vibe because of this man's face. Like apparently if they had removed the face, he would die and all that. So it's this tragic portrait of this circus performer who may or may not have existed, probably did not have a real face on the back of his head. And then the next song, which is about a real person, about Johnny Eck, who was featured in that Freaks movie, is called Tabletop Joe, about a man who was born. There's a condition for what he had. I don't think he wrote it down, but he was like the man without a body, I think is what they called him, because he really was. He just had his upper torso. Don't believe he had legs or anything. I think his hands maybe were his legs. But this is about that. And this has this light jazzy kind of bluesy piano vibe to it that's a little bit odd for this song. But yeah, story about, well, my mama didn't want me. So it's also another sad story about a circus performer. I'd like to see the play and see how this ties into the Alice stuff, but it somehow just works perfectly. Lost in the Harbor, a lot of images about things that are just lost in the harbor. Like people want this, but we lost it here. Or people want this, but we don't have this. Dark, moody instrumental passages connect more sort of straightforward, slow, ballady verses. But then after we get like the lyrics, we go into this weird, just like we're lost in the harbor type. It's dark and it's rainy and there's waves and there's just like a sense of like bad things are going to happen. Then we get We're All Mad Here, which is probably maybe the standout song on here. Like if there was going to be a single or something that you pulled from this album, maybe it's We're All Mad Here. A quote from the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. This has a very swordfish trombones percussion vibe. The rhythm is very much that. Some great lyrics. Things are dying in here. And it's almost like we're all mad here. We're all dying, but not one of those like we're dying, so just give in. But we're dying. Join us. Like a Beetlejuice type thing. Like come underground. Be part of this world. Just accept the fact that you're dead and revel in it. There's a line in your eyes will die like fish. There's a lot of death in this one. But there is the end of it, which I wish went on longer, but the end of it kind of starts to unravel. Like there's this ensuing madness quality to the music that just kind of starts to fall apart, but then they kind of wrap it up too soon. I wish that had gone on longer. Watch Her Disappear. This is like one of those, I'm talking like this, Tom Waits, like husky, close to the mic type vocals. It's addressed to a girl that he dreamed about. This is just like Tom doing a lot of vocals, a lot of storytelling while the band just kind of calmly plays on and just kind of does the bare minimum to set the stage because the focus should be on the lyrics, on the vocals in this song. Reeperbahn. The Reeperbahn, I believe, is currently, I don't know if it still exists, but it's like a hot spot in Hamburg where like the nightlife is, but I also believe the red light district is there. The Sinful Mile, I believe it was called at one point. It's a song about a girl named Rosie. The Reeperbahn is a place you go where you've lost your inheritance. All you have left is your common sense. Like, be careful. I don't know if in this story, Lewis Carroll in real life, resorted to going to places like this in order to exorcise whatever demons he was wrestling with, but it somehow fits. Also, it is the darkness that Tom Waits continues to return to shouldn't go with an Alice in Wonderland vibe, because I think Alice in Wonderland is such a great, awesome, innocent, playful children's story that also works for adults. But it works because we're dealing with Lewis Carroll. I'm Still Here. Beautiful, beautiful ballad. A sad ballad. I think the title kind of says it all. Hey man, I'm still here. The vibe is Tom Waits' debut album Closing Time as far as the piano. There's a line in here, you haven't looked at me that way in years, which don't know who that's addressed to, but either way, there's a disturbing aspect to it. It's the sadness of somebody who's been left behind. Maybe somebody who grew up and doesn't quite see that person the same way they did when they were an innocent young child. Fish and Bird, a slow, woozly ballad with ocean imagery and sailors and longing and birds and whales, and just there's a lot of longing in here. Barcarelle, I believe, is a gondoliers type song, like a boatman song. So it has this sort of like woozy kind of swaying quality. This is your typical Waits jazz adjacent type ballad type stuff. There's lyrics in here about the narrator being alone with Alice. It's just, there's a creepiness to this song. Why it's called, I don't know if Barcarelle means something else other than a boatman song. But maybe the boat is going across the Carron. Maybe it's a ferry boat at this point. We're going across the River Styx or something like that. Who knows? And then the last song is a sweet, sad, melancholy little melody of an instrumental called Fawn, which is just almost feels gardeny, like you're out in a garden while somebody's playing this wistful little sad thing. Having talked my way through this for the first time ever, as I've never tried to explain this song to anybody, I do think the sequencing works. Like that Komen Susablat or whatever it is, when it comes early, it's the first kind of jarring thing that happens. And then you don't really get anything that has that kind of jarring effect till We're All Mad Here, which is like 3 or 4 songs later. And then you get the Reaper Bond, which while the energy of this is kind of a low-key junkyard acoustic, the lyrics are a little more jarring. So I guess the jarring stuff is sprinkled well throughout the album. But I don't know. I think this is a fascinating album. I think it is a creeper. It builds on you. It's something that I think literally gets better with every listen because I appreciate it. I know what's going to happen, so I know how this maybe lyric or this little motif ties in with something later, something that like, pick up on over the years. But yeah, it's a solid album. Don't sleep on this. If it doesn't blow you away at first, give it a couple more listens and pay attention to the lyrics because could be some dark stuff. If I had to rank this among the other 16 that I've already done, I have it at 8. I probably would have dropped it 4 or 5 down when it first came out, but I'm realizing the older I get that except for the 370s albums ranked above it, it really is the 80s and on that I prefer. I prefer that sort of percussive driven sound that he has. And so while there are some other really good things in the 70s that I recognize people really like, the overall vibe of this, the moodiness, that post-80s sound, that this is a mellow, calm version of that, just resonates really well with me. And I think this is a great listen. So yeah, that's all I got on Alice. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Let me know your thoughts on this. Hopefully I'll remember to post the name of the author of the play in the comments. Not good at remembering stuff like that. But yeah, give me your thoughts on this album, on what you think, all that kind of stuff, on Alice, Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, plays, music, cats, caterpillars, Cheshire cats, lizards with a ladder. It's one of my favorite lines in the book. It's a lizard with a ladder. Bill. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.